I'm Cindy Dittus with the ARC of Mississippi, and my topic was exploring sexuality in individuals with disabilities.
Cindy, I have another question. How do you gently suggest to parents that when their children are young and they think it's cute for them to run and hug everybody or jump in everybody's lap, how do you let them know that that's not appropriate and that it grows up into them and then they become young adults and they're still wanting to run and jump in people's laps and things like that? How do you
And
let
then
them?
the police get called.
Yes, I mean, how do you, because we're in the South, and everybody feels that you're supposed to be friendly and huggy and all this stuff. How do you let parents know that that's not good? Because it's not.
It's not. And usually the rule of thumb that we always teach is an arm's distance away. And your child gets to a certain age, and it's a hard thing, but you need to start when they're young because it's much harder, just as every other habit is harder to break the older you get. The rule of thumb is an arm's length away. One of the things that's really important for individuals with disabilities to realize is that there's an appropriate touch and inappropriate touch and confusing touch. And they need to be able to distinguish between those three touches. I have been actually doing sex education training and sexuality training for probably about 5 years now. I am also the parent of a child with a disability who's 31 years old and who at probably the age of 12 had started some self-exploration, and so it's just kind of grown over the years, and I went and got some training to talk about sex and people with disabilities. I'm also on a federal grant to address sex and sexual assault and domestic violence against women with disabilities. So we look at not just the sexuality part, but also you have to look at the abuse part and the exploitation part.
You spoke about the distant relatives that would come into someone's life, but what happens when there's a process where they need some healing or some counseling or something? Where you go?
One of the things that we found, I work on an abuse grant that's a federally funded grant to address abuse in women with disabilities. One of the things that we found is the typical responders to abuse and to someone who has been assaulted or abused cannot receive services in the typical way that the typical women who experience that would. Service providers aren't prepared to help with someone with a vision impairment who may need to have shelter. They're not ready to, they go, gosh, don't bring any psychiatric patients in there because holy cow, they can't deal with people on meds and all that stuff. One of the things that we have to do, and wheelchairs and personal attendants, no, they're not ready to do that. One of the things that we're trying to do is to educate those responders so that if a person with a disability comes in for their services and has experienced a traumatic experience and all that, can come in and get services the way most of us in this room would get those services. It's still, and it's not just Mississippi, it's across the country. Right now, there are a couple providers who are actually on the grant who would be able to provide those services, but they're nowhere near able to reach the need. People who experience violence and sexual assault or rape, people with disabilities are at a much greater rate, abused at a much greater rate than the general population. And for people with cognitive disabilities, that rate is even higher, and the more the disability, the more involved the disability, the more chances of them being assaulted and experience violence in their life.